Okay. Hi, everyone. I want to start off by saying thank you all for joining us today for our discussion on leading in service of LGBTQ plus youth. My name is Elizabeth. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm an implementation manager at the Center for Creative Leadership out of Greensboro, North Carolina. So I'm also a member of our LGBTQ plus ERG and our Young Professionals ERG, which co-coordinated this event today. And I am joined by Bree, Raven, and Erica from Joy as Resistance, which is an awesome organization that works to support queer and marginalized youth. So I will give them all a moment to introduce themselves.
Okay. Hey everyone, my name is Bree Doves. I use all pronouns. I am the founder and executive director and clinician and anything else that needs doing at Joy as Resistance. And I am super excited to be here.
Hi, thank you all so much for being here. I'm Raven. My pronouns are they, she, and I am the clinical program manager here at Joy. I've been here for 2 years, and I'm also a social worker, clinician.
What's up, y'all? My name is Erica. I use they, them pronouns, and I'm the school and nonprofit partnerships manager at Joy. And a bit about my background is that I was an educator for 5 years in the community that we serve. And I feel like that experience has really colored the ways that I show up at Joy and the structures that are built and everything that I do. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you so much for the introductions. I know before joining CCL, I was also an educator here in North Carolina. So it's part of why it really got me excited about your organization. We're super excited to have you join us, especially since we're celebrating Pride Month this month. And we also just want to give a shout out to everyone who's joining our live stream. So if you're here and you're joining us, please feel free to drop in the chat where you're joining us from, what organizations you're with. We'd love to hear from all of you. And while you're doing that, I'm going to go ahead and dive into getting to know Joyous Resistance a little bit more. So we'd love to learn more about your organization and just broadly the role that leadership plays in the work that you do. So first off, could you just get us started by sort of telling the story of how Joyous Resistance started and the meaning of its name?
Yeah, I would love to start by telling you that. Happy Pride Month, everyone. Joy as Resistance has been a significant journey from start to where we are now. I have lived in Colorado my whole life. Grew up in Castle Rock and Sedalia, Larkspur, which is like about an hour south of Denver. If you are somewhere else that is not Colorado. And I became a school social worker and started working at a middle school in the far northeast part of Denver. And I learned a lot about working with youth when I was there. And before that, I did different kinds of community organizing work and other kind of social work adjacent things, but I didn't have a degree or anything like that. I was the first person in my family to go to college. So after I did that and became a school social worker and got an actual job at the school, I realized how few resources there were available for queer youth specifically, and how much these systems that we're all engaging in, mainly education, nonprofit, and youth services, are really so far from each other. So I started the GSA, or Gender Sexuality Alliance, at our school, and then just started building with the students that I was working with. Ended up calling the students across the street at the high school and their GSA and started working with them. And every time I would try to get the young people access to the resources they were asking for, there was either incredibly long wait lists, it was not affirming at all of their identities, and people were just not having many options at all to access healthcare or mentorship or any of those things. So we co-designed, I led a series of pilots with a small team, and really co-designed every aspect of programming from Joy as Resistance with the young people that I was working with there. And what came out of that was our 3 program areas, which are clinical services. We serve ages 10 to 24. The biggest thing there was that accessibility was a huge issue. Public transportation here is awful. And so other mental health organizations were saying, like, I'll give you a bus pass, and you're not going to have a 14-year-old, taking an hour-long bus ride each way just to go to 50 minutes of therapy, especially to a provider who maybe isn't actually meeting them where they are. So we decided that our clinical services were really going to be based on being accessible, affirming, and affordable. And so we actually bought an ambulance. First, we bought a school bus. That didn't work out. Then we bought an ambulance. And then we were actually driving to where folks were, meeting them in their neighborhoods. And that was the first several years of Joy as Resistance. I started piloting in 2019, started it in 2020 when the pandemic happened. And at that moment, we were like, well, we have no idea what it's going to look like after this, but we know that these services are more important now than ever. And so decided to keep going. And here we are 4 years later. And we're a team of 8 now, full-time staff, and we have some clinical contractors, and we just moved into an office space for the first time. That's not half a cubicle, which is just incredibly, incredibly exciting. The name specifically comes from a conference that I went to when I was in grad school called the Creating Change Conference, which is also where we have presented as an organization about our leadership stuff, and have also been a few different times. And there was this, I remember very distinctly walking into the ballroom of the conference area, and there was a sign that said Joy as Resistance. And there's a poem by Toy Derrica that has a line about Joy as Resistance, and that joy is the ultimate act of resistance to systems of oppression that want to make you feel small and hidden and sad and disenfranchised. Mm-hmm. So centering joy has always been something that the young people have really resonated with and really moves us forward as an organization. So that's the story. And I was like, yeah, nothing says queer joy more than a room full of LGBTQ folks who are dancing their hearts out.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for sharing. It's frustrating and unfortunate that so many marginalized young people are in these tough situations, but we are so, so grateful for organizations like yours that offer support that really, truly is accessible for the people who need it. So we do want to focus a little bit on how leadership plays a role in the work that you do at Joy as Resistance. Can you share just a little bit about the way that leadership is developed, or leadership development has impacted how you lead and serve within the organization and within your community?
Yeah. So I'll start with that one. I think one of the things that makes Joy as Resistance really unique is our foundation in natural systems, and really learning and engaging with our natural world to help us to create systems that work for us. So the metaphor we use oftentimes is geese. And geese, all fly south for the winter. They are impacted very significantly by the seasons, as are we. And they all fly in a V formation, right? Because that's the most aero efficient. And they all know where they're going, and they all go together. But whatever goose is in the front changes regularly. And your position in the formation, if you're a goose, Canadian goose specifically, changes as you're moving forward. And so we think about that. We think about bees a lot, mushrooms. These are like the systems that we've really integrated into our leadership. And mainly that the basis of that is that it needs to be sustainable. Leadership is so incredibly difficult, and no one person, one organization, one anything can withstand that. Nature shows us over and over and over that you need to have biodiversity, you need to have structure, and then you need to have symbiosis to create a thriving environment. And so we need all of those things coming together. And so whatever level we're talking about, whether it's our work with youth, whether it's our work with each other, whether it's our work with other organizations in the ecosystem or the systems that we're under, we apply the same concept of approaching it with symbiosis and flexibility, because human beings are unpredictable. And we don't try to pretend like we know what they're doing or are going to do in the future.
Yeah, there's I think a danger in having just like a single leader, which is what Bree's also speaking to, that happens like internally, like amongst our team, where we're going to resist that kind of draw that how a lot of places present leadership. It's like actually a shared leadership model here. And that also shows up in how we work with young people. Like I can speak specifically for the clinical program. I mean, how Joy was created in general was already, Bree's pilot program was already like driven and led by young people and what they wanted. They really got a voice in that. And we continue doing that in our program offerings now. Like really tangibly how that happens in the clinical program is like we co-create treatment plans. So we're not like on the back end, like I always use this example of, I don't know if this actually lands with my clients because it's like, is this too old of a reference? But like, I'm not like the Wizard of Oz, like behind a curtain over here, like trying to like do something to you as a clinician. Like we're working together here and I'm not like keeping a secret from you. I often explain like my reasoning for asking certain questions or like why we're doing whatever activity we're doing. It's like very transparent and continually consensual, like ongoing. I'm checking in to make sure and they're consenting to their treatment plans and we're literally looking at it together. And then also like how we, the direction we move as a program, we actually just did a needs assessment that was putting back out into the community, into like the young people's that we work with's hands, of asking them, what is it that you want right now? We're post pandemic, we're not, but we're post lockdown. And now what do you want? Do you want to come to an office? So that was actually a big reason as to how we developed like having a physical space for people to come in person, and is pointing us towards what other kind of offerings we're going to have too, like what kind of groups we're going to do and things like that. So bringing leadership from multiple directions and people.
Yeah.
I think the only thing that I would quickly add on to that is that our framework of really looking to nature to build the ways that we're kind of trying to hierarchize, is that a word? Just trying to break down hierarchies is through Adrienne Marie Brown's emergent strategy. So we really do look to them and their literature, and that influences a lot of we do. And with one of our main values being liberation, I feel like for me personally, it has been very freeing to break down capitalistic systems, or the nonprofit industrial complex, where you see a lot of like toxic, poisonous ways. There are people in leadership who do not reflect the communities that we serve, and it's very important for us to be a part of that community, serving that community, and doing it in a new, queered way.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that insight. I think it's great. I know that we at CCL are big believers in leadership as a social process, and that every single person who's involved in an organization has a role to play in leading it. So I think that is really exciting to hear how you're looking to nature and how there's alignment between those items. Could you tell us more about the sort of details of building a system that speaks to just sort of the nonprofit, something that prioritizes respect and that growth that you are looking for? I know we've got kind of the big picture. What does it look like to really build a system that can sustain that environment?
I would say that it really is based on the idea that clarity and consistency are really something that we are biologically wired to want and engage. It keeps us safer to have things in specific categories and to have very clear designations and lines. And that's why we have systems of leadership that look the way that they do. And that doesn't work long term because one, everyone has the capacity for leadership and something to contribute to the space. And two, no one can sustain that forever. No one can lead forever. Or have carry the weight of something for a super long time, especially when you're talking about changing a giant system like the nonprofit industrial complex, or carceral practices and clinical work. You know, that takes a lot of us steering this ship together. And another way that I think about it too is like a symphony or like music, where you have a choir who holds a note, right? But it's not everyone holding the note the whole time, but the note can be held for a long period of time because different people are taking breaths. And so the systems that we build are really much less about the song that we choose, so to say, and more about how do you make sure that we are clear about who's taking what in each specific situation, so that we can truly rest, so that we can come back and play and live in our full creativity and expression. And also, that way of doing things is messy, as we also know from like nature, and doesn't always work out exactly the way you want it to. And so what you lack in predictability, you make up for in creativity. And it's a delicate balance. And so when we're doing systems work, no matter what process we're really talking about, it looks like making sure that it is person-centered, focused on balance between the people who are most impacted, and then is sustainable for seasonal or for a period of time, instead of saying this is our system and it's going to be that way forever.
I think that also means that things happen more slowly, as they do in nature too.
Yeah, that's a great perspective to think about the pace at which we move and the sort of the fluidity that's required to maintain a long-term change. I would personally love to hear more about how you as an organization focus on role modeling leadership with queer youth and how that is important, especially when there may be a lack of access to representation or leaders who are sort of out and visible, and how that may be different than a traditional idea of leadership. So maybe let's start with just, can you tell us a little bit more about how role modeling leadership with queer youth is important to you all?
Erica, over to you. Yeah.
Did you want to answer this one?
Oh, yeah, I saw your name on there. First, yeah, I'll go. I think if Doan were here, who is the program manager that leads Big Queer Little Queer, who it really talks a lot about how social capital is built in mentorship and the importance of representation in leadership. That is really important to us. And yeah, there's a lot of role modeling, I feel like, through example of being able to see queer people who are older than you and not having to really like be shown a lot of the trauma that I feel like the media perpetuates, and being able to relate to older people and seeing that they're leaders in their own community, and are really just passionate about things that they're passionate about. I don't know, Raven, how would you answer that?
Yeah. I mean, I think about my own personal like coming out journey, and how representation would have really made such a difference for me, and like the small ways that I had that did make a difference for me, but on a larger scale, like I grew up in the South and went to Catholic school, and so I didn't have like I had to like make my own queer friends, and even then I was like, oh, I really like these people, but like I don't know why, you know, and I'm sure they were friends with me because they were probably like, we know why you like us. But I couldn't like put those pieces together for me, but for myself, because I didn't have this like consistent future. And also even then they were still different than me. It's like, I mean, I'm grateful that they were also Black people, but they were studs. I didn't have a lot of like femme, bisexual specific like representation in like a leadership role and like an older adult role. I mean, even in the media. So I think if I would have had that, like if I would have had Big Queer, Little Queer, or just like a very obviously queer, cool organization, just like in your face queer, as a young person, I maybe would have found that for myself a lot sooner. And so I think I really appreciate how not only are we doing that via like mentorship, but we're also just like very in your face queer. I mean, we're like queering professionalism all the time. And so and all of our marketing, it's like we're very queer, and not like rainbow capitalism queer, but like genuinely queer culture queer. Like we're out in community and like have friends and like are building community and organizing in that way. So that feels super important to me personally, and I see that in our community too.
Yeah, I think if I were to add to that, I found what I was gonna say. But I'm thinking about the services that I deliver, and a component of Joyful Spaces is going into GSAs, so Gender and Sexuality Alliances, and really being able to do leadership development there, because I do think that there are a lot of queer youth who are inherently leaders, because that is what marginalization in folks can perpetuate, is like you pave your own path. And to be able to tap into those skill sets is something that folks and students are not given that opportunity to do, especially being a former teacher, leading a GSA, knowing I was burnt out, leading that GSA. What does it mean for us to come in and be able to give them the tools and also teach them how, we function at Joy is a part of our services, to be able to be like, this GSA doesn't have to function in a hierarchical way. What is leader, co-leader, treasurer, all these kinds of ways. What if there are other kinds of leadership systems, and we can choose what that looks like for you all and what fits best. So yeah, that's how that looks in our programming too.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. I know it really resonated with me as a part of your sort of mission and organization. As a queer person that grew up also in a small town in the South, not having really visible out sort of role models or leaders is something that was, I don't know that challenging is the word I would choose, but I think it was harder to imagine what my life could look like as an adult without having some of that visibility and just awareness in front of me to see all of the potentials that life could have. So I love that that is something that you all are sort of creating in the communities that you're working in. Sort of building off that, I'd love to also know, as you're working with LGBTQ youth, what is the most fulfilling for you? What about your work in particular is bringing you joy, specifically or sort of generally, as you do this work?
I can share first. I have something. It just happened yesterday, but I don't know if you saw the review that Hannah sent us, but yeah. I mean, my work is very like, this is a really challenging thing about being a clinician, is like you don't really see very often. Sometimes you get little glimpses of how the work you're doing is impacting someone's life. And I think that's actually true, like for what it is to be a human. But especially in a clinical setting, it's just like, okay, and now you're off, and I hope that you're taking something from this. I don't really know how this is like implementing in your life and integrating. And we're getting, is it technically a grant? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we had
from Lady Gaga.
Yeah, from Lady Gaga. We had a testimonial from someone who was a former client here, and getting to hear like that person did take something and like was literally saying like what they took from our work together. And I was like, oh yeah, we did do that together. We did do that work together. Yes, that's true. We did talk about that a lot. And yeah, I think like that really brought me a lot of joy right now. And I don't get those very often, but when I do, I really try to hold on to them and like put them in a little note on my phone or something.
Yeah. I would say something that's bringing me a lot of joy is how intergenerational our work is like growing into. I think like we lost a lot of queer elders, and a lot of queer elders didn't make it through the 80s and 90s, whether that's like AIDS crisis or any of the other systemic barriers, hate crimes, yeah, whatever it is. And so we just had our storytelling event as our kickoff to Pride, where we had 6 intergenerational storytellers telling a story of Pride. And to be in a crowd like that is like, was one of the greatest moments. Is something we do every year. And to be able to hear young people, our youngest storyteller was 16, and our oldest storyteller was like in the early 60s. And to watch them all interact with each other and build this like collective power and joy that we really can like create that together, especially with how many, with what the culture is like right now, especially towards LGBTQ youth. Just watching them be like, whoa, that's really an adult like trans person who like has a real job, and like you can actually, thrive as a queer person, and to actually be able to physically talk to someone who is doing that has brought me so much joy, and my queer elders who have been on this journey with me for Joy as Resistance. And then also I'm thinking about like all the generations to come of our impact that we can make together is bringing me so much joy and hope.
Yeah, and I think for me, what brings me the most fulfillment and joy is when I'm delivering my workshop. So I go into schools, elementary through high school, and I'm doing LGBTQ inclusivity trainings with adults who serve youth. I don't, kind of like Raven said, get to really see that direct impact on youth, but working with adults who are either straight or questioning or who are queer in the audience to be able to talk about gender and sexuality and help straight people get free. And what I mean by that is like being like showing gender and sexuality umbrellas, terminology, spectrum, is understanding that you are also on this spectrum as well. And the only way to help other people get free is if you get free yourself. And what does it mean for us to look inward and be able to unpack that and to see wheels turning in the audience? And have folks come up to me in between sessions and talk about how they've taken these exercises home and talked about it with their families, with their children, and having their children come out to them because of these activities and what it's meant for the students that they're serving. Also, in the classroom management tips that we're giving has been so impactful. I have the coolest job ever. It's awesome. Yeah.
Thank you. So we are very close to running out of time. So I do want to open us up to a Q&A for everyone who is here. If you have any questions that you want to ask to Bree, Raven, and Erica, if you want to share those with us, we can take a moment and hopefully get some good answers for you, or at least answers, even if they're not great. No pressure. So we will give it just to give you an opportunity to share those questions with us if you are interested. Okay, so here's a question. We're gonna go with, what advice would you give folks who want to better serve or support LGBTQ plus youth in their own communities?
Yeah, I can start off. I think the narrative that we hear around young people, especially, is always like, oh my gosh, being a teenager is so hard. Oh wow, you are like such an unreasonable, like when I told people I was a middle school social worker, they'd be like, wow, you deserve a Medal of Honor. And I think my biggest piece of advice would be to really think about that narrative and how that sounds to young people and what it's telling them and reinforcing in young people about themselves and about what you think about them. And how we generally like talk about young people as a culture. I think that we are much stronger together. And oftentimes in youth work, people are like, okay, it's only the youth leading all of the things, or it's only the adults leading the things, and we're teaching the kids, right? Because they need our help. And I think stepping away from that narrative of building power together with young people and being able to like actually listen and not dismiss all of the things that young people say as just silly or newfangled or whatever. and helping them to see what perspective we have, what wisdom we have shared from like other spaces, and how everyone has something to offer would be my biggest piece of advice. Listening and not repeating stereotypes about what it's like to be a young person.
I think for me, some advice that I would give is to lean into what it means to make your advocacy intersectional, because I think oftentimes folks who are wanting to help the LGBTQ community are like, how do I just like stay within this one realm, and how are we bringing in ability and race and all of these other dynamics that we can when we're talking about the queer community. And so, yeah, I think that would be my number one. And number two would probably be to do your own research and really to diversify the consumption that you're having. If you're listening to straight music all the time, learning from straight authors, etc. There are just so much great content out there that can support someone in really understanding themselves so that they can go into community and be able to spread those learnings to young people.
I think that
I
is
want to say
great.
one other thing about leadership. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Sorry, probably now we're over. Yeah, so I think what I was going to say is that leadership too, generally, like whether you're working with young people or otherwise, that transparency really does go such a long way. And so many of our systems are built on radical transparency and really focusing on trust. Like all of our salaries are transparent and all of our work roles are transparent. We have systems that have been built in over the years that we co-designed together that work for us in our organization at this time. And that starts with transparency and also starts with the starting of the conversation. And so that would be the other thing that I would say for not just working with LGBTQ folks, but I think queer people do that really well. We do the opening up of the conversation and expanding possibilities really well. And so not being afraid to open that conversation and then be transparent in it, even if you don't know what's going on, feels like really huge.
Thank you. We are unfortunately out of time, so we are going to have to go ahead and wrap it up for today. I do want to give a huge thank you to all of you, the three of you, for joining us and answering our questions, as well as everyone who's joined online to learn more about Joy's Resistance and how we can support LGBTQ youth and lead in service of them. I am, as we close out, just going to pass it over to the Joy's Resistance team. How can we, if we want to learn more about your organization, donate to your cause, support your work, how can we support you?
Yeah, we have our website linked in the comments in the chat. So you can go there, read more about us on there. There's lots to read. You can read about our resistance in practice, like HR policies, how we did some of that as a team. There's a way to donate on the homepage. You can buy our merch, which is really cool.
Our merch is so cool.
Yeah, we worked with a local queer Latinx artist in Denver, and we love their work. So really excited to have worked with him. And so buy some of that. And also just tell people in your life. Tell people who you think that would benefit from knowing about us, or would just think that we're really cool and want to connect. Yeah, I think that's really the basis of how we get more people involved anyway, is just to share.
And follow us on Instagram.
Yeah, we have a Facebook page, Instagram, and LinkedIn. So follow us on all the socials.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you all again for joining us. I hope you share this conversation with your networks, share the link, share the Instagram, so that we can amplify all of these great insights and the great work that's being done. And thank you all so much for tuning in, and goodbye.
Happy Pride.